He's a man of strong Christian faith, and he is appalled by the allegations. I suspect now that he's, as it were, banished to the sort of open prison somewhere on the Sandringham estate.
Over the weekend, fresh claims surfaced from Princess Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell, and they paint a picture of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor that is even more troubling than many people already suspected. According to Burrell, Andrew would openly swear at staff, telling them to F off, get out of here, in what he described as entitled and pompous outbursts. Not whispered complaints, not minor temper. Direct, obscene language aimed at the very people paid to serve the royal household. And this is all coming out just as reports suggest that palace staff are now refusing to serve him at his new home. Paul Burrell, who served both Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Diana, has released a new memoir called The Royal Insider. In interviews promoting the book, including comments to Fox News Digital, he described what he claims was Andrew's behaviour behind palace doors. He says he had a front row seat to what he calls Andrew's pompousness.
He will be sensing the need to give duty of care. This man is a broken, finished man at best. I would strongly believe that he would very much like him to testify, but knows that to stand up and say that is a hiding to nothing.
Especially during the years when Andrew and Sarah Ferguson were newly married and living at Buckingham Palace. Burrell claims Andrew would swear at staff and dismiss them in a way that he found shocking. He described it as obscene and said the way Andrew treated people was simply unacceptable. Now, as always, we have to say this is Burrell's account. Buckingham Palace does not comment on such books, and they have made that clear before. They also do not speak for Andrew anymore, since he is no longer a working royal. But what makes these claims particularly interesting is the timing. According to a report in The Sun, staff at Andrew's new residence have been told they do not have to serve him if they feel uncomfortable. A source told the paper there is already quite a list of people who have said no thanks. The same source described Andrew as being viewed as a total pariah. That word, pariah, is strong. And when you hear talk of a mutiny among royal staff, it is almost unheard of. British royal expert Hilary Fordwich told Fox News Digital that many staff members reportedly find Andrew creepy or disgusting. She even described the situation as unprecedented resistance, something that amounts almost to a strike. Think about that for a moment.
Great to have you. There are, of course, reports today accusing Andrew Mountbatten Windsor of sharing another official document with one of his business contacts, but we've seen a week of negative headlines and revelations. How concerned will the King be about this and all the allegations?
It would be astonishing if he wasn't concerned.
Royal staff are known for discretion, loyalty, and quiet professionalism. For there to be open resistance, if these reports are accurate, says a lot about the mood behind the scenes. Now, let's rewind slightly to understand how we got here. Andrew has officially moved out of Royal Lodge, the 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park that he had occupied for years. There had been an Easter deadline looming, and it appears he has complied. He is temporarily staying at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, which is owned by King Charles. Wood Farm, you may remember, was where Prince Philip spent much of his retirement, and where the late Queen also stayed during periods of privacy. Andrew is expected to relocate to Marsh Farm, reportedly a more modest property compared to Royal Lodge. That move alone tells you something about his current status within the family. According to Burrell's book, the problems with Andrew and staff go back decades. He claims that when Andrew and Sarah were newly married, they would hold elaborate dinner parties in their rooms at Buckingham Palace. These were not small gatherings. Burrell says they would demand 3- and 4-course meals, complete with starters and puddings, almost like an à la carte restaurant. And they used the Queen's staff and chefs to do it.
Appalled by the allegations and, of course, affected in his role as monarch as well, because the headlines are all about this, which, no institution wants that. And he is trying to do, and is doing, an extraordinary job in his role as head of state.
He says the staff were kept up until midnight, cooking, serving and clearing away. Eventually, according to Burrell, the staff revolted and protested. The master of the household informed the Queen, and she intervened. Burrell recalls the late Queen saying, "These are my staff. They are not yours, Andrew, and you must treat them with respect." That suggests the Queen was aware, at least at times, that things had gone too far. Burrell says Andrew did receive a ticking off from his mother, but he also claims the behaviour continued in other ways. He alleges that Andrew and Sarah would refuse to let maids into their rooms to make the beds, sometimes staying in bed for long stretches and effectively blocking normal housekeeping routines. He describes it as abusing the system. Again, this is Burrell's account, but it adds to a picture that has been slowly forming for years. Burrell also claims that Andrew was always greedy and always wanted more. He says Andrew believed he was indestructible, and in Burrell's view, that confidence came from one key factor: his mother's protection. This is where things become more complicated and, frankly, more human. Burrell suggests that Queen Elizabeth may have had a particularly close bond with Andrew because, by the time he was born in 1960, she had been on the throne for 8 years. When Charles and Anne were young, she was a new queen, balancing state duties with motherhood. By the time Andrew arrived, her reign was established and she had more time to spend at home. Burrell says she doted on Andrew. He even implies that she rarely said no to him. That aligns with the long-standing narrative that Andrew was the Queen's favourite son. He also describes Prince Philip as the guardian of the gate, someone who protected the Queen from being burdened with personal problems. After Philip's death in 2021, Burrell claims Andrew was the first at her side.
People have to remember when they just think of him or Andrew, what is in his mind. Look at he and the Queen. Their constant concern about those women who've been sexually violated, those who've been ill-treated. The Queen was, I think, just yesterday doing that.
It is a poignant image, especially considering what happened next. In 2019, Andrew stepped back from royal duties following his disastrous BBC Newsnight interview about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Many of you will remember that interview. It was meant to clear his name. Instead, it deepened public skepticism. His explanations about his friendship with Epstein, his account of visiting Epstein's homes, and that now infamous claim about not being able to sweat all became widely criticised. Inclusion in the recently released Epstein-related documents does not imply wrongdoing, and that is important to state clearly. In late January, the US Department of Justice released millions of pages of records connected to Epstein. Andrew and Sarah Ferguson appeared in some email exchanges and photographs. Reports mention images allegedly showing Andrew on all fours above an unidentified woman. Andrew has consistently denied wrongdoing and has not been convicted of any crime, but the optics have been devastating. King Charles stripped Andrew of his remaining military affiliations and royal patronages in late 2025, amid renewed scrutiny. Andrew no longer uses His Royal Highness in any official capacity. He is, for all practical purposes, a private citizen with a royal title. And that brings us back to the staff situation. If reports are true that staff are opting out of serving him, it is a striking reversal of fortune. There was a time when Andrew travelled the world as a trade envoy representing the United Kingdom. There was a time when he was seen as confident, perhaps overly so, but still firmly embedded within the royal structure. Now he is reportedly relocating to a more modest property and facing what some call a mutiny from staff. Burrell also touches on Sarah Ferguson in his interviews. He describes her as a farmer's daughter, the daughter of a polo manager. He claims Andrew told her she could have anything she wanted, and she did.
Good question. he took very tough action back in October when he stripped him of his title. He was kicked out of the Royal Lodge at Windsor. He takes that role as the most important part of what he does. But he's a brother. Now, they may not be that close, but he's nonetheless a brother. And I suspect now that he's, as it were, banished.
According to him, she became spoiled and entitled as well, and that the two of them were well matched in their taste for luxury. Sarah lost her official title years ago, though she continued to be known publicly as the Duchess of York. She and Andrew divorced in 1996, but continued living together at Royal Lodge for many years. That arrangement raised eyebrows at times, but they always insisted they remained close. More recently, Sarah has faced her own setbacks. A charity connected to her has reportedly shut down, and she has been dropped as patron of several organisations. Whether that is directly linked to renewed scrutiny around Andrew is not always made explicit, but the timing is difficult to ignore. Burrell makes one more interesting point. He says that when the Queen died in 2022, Charles inherited Andrew as a problem. He suggests that Charles likely knows more than the public does, and that he is now in control of how Andrew's situation is managed. It raises a broader question about how the monarchy handles internal discipline. We have seen Charles slim down the monarchy, focus on a smaller working group of senior royals, and quietly sideline those who cause reputational damage. Andrew's life and career, as Burrell bluntly puts it, are finished in terms of public royal service. He says we all have to pay for our sins, and Andrew and Sarah must pay for theirs. Now, to be fair, Burrell has been a controversial figure himself. He has written multiple books, and some critics argue he trades on his royal connections, so it is reasonable to approach his claims with caution. At the same time, his proximity to the family for many years means his perspective cannot be dismissed outright.
Telling the truth, would you be willing to testify or give a statement under oath if you were asked?
Well, I'm like everybody else, and I would have to take all the legal advice that there was before I was to do that sort of thing. But if push came to shove and the legal advice was to do so, then I would be duty-bound to do so.
What strikes me most is not just the language he describes, but the cultural shift we are witnessing. In decades past, staff would rarely, if ever, openly refuse to serve a senior royal. That was simply not done. The institution depended on hierarchy and tradition. If there truly is a list of staff opting out, that signals a serious breakdown in that traditional dynamic. And we also have to consider public opinion. Andrew's settlement in the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre in 2022, without admission of liability, was another turning point. While it avoided a trial, it did not restore his reputation. Many members of the public feel deeply uncomfortable about his continued proximity to royal properties and funding arrangements. There has been debate over who pays for his security and housing. King Charles has reportedly insisted that Andrew's expenses be covered privately rather than through public funds. Even so, critics argue that any support tied to the royal estate indirectly affects taxpayers. So here we are in 2026, watching a once prominent royal relocate from a grand 30-room mansion to a smaller property, with former staff speaking out and current staff reportedly stepping back. It is not the fairy tale ending anyone would have imagined when Andrew married Sarah in 1986 at Westminster Abbey, in front of millions of viewers worldwide. Before I wrap up, I want to ask you something. Do you believe these accounts from Paul Burrell? Do you think Andrew was shielded too much by his mother? And do you think King Charles has handled the situation firmly enough, or should he go further? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I always read them, and many of you have followed this story for decades, so your perspective matters. If you enjoy these deep dives into royal family news and the latest developments, please make sure you are subscribed. We're following every twist and turn, and there will undoubtedly be more to come. And as always, thank you for watching.